Good morning. It's good to be with you here again this morning. It's good to share. It's good to be in God's house, always. It's always good to be here. And to know that we have a God that cares and is concerned and draws us close to Him. And there's so much that we look at in this world, and there's so much we see in this world, and there's so much we experience in this world that is so different from the reality, I guess, that's out there. So different from what's really going on. And this morning I want to talk to you a little bit about some interesting things. And a number of you, no, not so many of you, a few of you were at our pool party yesterday afternoon. And yesterday afternoon, we had a good time at the pool party. A number of people were there. We had a good time. But there was a little bit of conflict there. And some of you were aware of it, and some of you weren't, and that's okay. And we're there, and there were some young men there that were growing up, let's say. They were learning to be, stand up for themselves and to express themselves. And there was some disagreement. And anytime there's disagreement, what do we feel inside? Anytime turmoil, anxiety, there's some fear, there's some chaos, isn't there? Things aren't real comfortable. We don't like it. We like things to go smooth. We like things to be friendly. We like things to be easy. And they're not always. Sometimes things come up that make it a little bit harder. And you know what? That's the way life is. It works that way. Sometimes there are difficulties in life. That's just a basic reality. 40-some years ago, Shirley and I celebrated our first wedding anniversary. And it was an exciting time, and we'd planned for it. We were looking forward to it. And it was early in the summer, and everything was working out. But I was working at a job. This was my one summer working at for a concrete construction company. And I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to concrete construction, but I think if I remember right, that day, they took me to a job site, and they'd given me the basic things I needed to do. And they gave me a jackhammer, and they put me in a basement, basically, that was the basement walls curving in, if you know what I mean. Because of the pressure of the dirt and the water and everything around them, the walls tend to come in. And they had trained me and taught me how you break things out, and you're able to make those walls straight again. But on this wall particularly, they were wanting me to chip away the bulging out part to knock it back, and then they would put a smooth surface on there and make it straight up and down. So I spent the whole day working by myself, and usually I had somebody there that was older than me or that had more experience than I did helping me do what I do. But I'm there at the job, and I was looking forward to getting off about 5, like we got off every day. And so I was there working away, and 5 came, as it got close to 5, I started to pack things up and wait around and wait, and nobody came to pick me up from the company. And of course, I didn't know what was going on. It was before the time of cell phones, and I'm not sure what's going on. I have no idea. And I waited, and finally I took back out my tools and went back and did some more work and got some more done. And finally, I think it was maybe about 6:30 or 7, somebody finally came to pick me up. And they'd been on a pour somewhere. They'd been pouring concrete, doing some work, and they got tied up, and there was nobody to come get me until they were done with the job. There was nothing they could do. And so life is like that. And so I'm glad to be on my way home. My wife and I had some plans for the evening. We were looking forward to it. And I got home, and Shirley was just a basket case. She was so afraid. She didn't know what had happened. She'd had no communication. She expected me at home at 5 like I always came home, but I wasn't there. And she had heard some sirens going off. The ambulance going somewhere. And she was just sure they were hauling me to the hospital somewhere. And she was sure that things were very, very bad. And needless to say, I was able to assure her, and she was glad everything was fine. But what is it that's inside of us that we tend to go to the negative right off all the time? What is it that brings out the struggle around us? There's all kinds of tension in this world. There's all kinds of chaos. There's all kinds of conflict. And we don't understand it. And yesterday, Kimberly shared a story again that I heard briefly that she had shared with me a week ago or so. And maybe you could just come up and share a little bit of that story, Kimberly. Kimberly is so much enjoys being up front, and I'm trying to. Shall we grab one of these microphones or? Okay.
Just so you all know, this causes me anxiety.
Yeah.
I mean, my chest is tight, my pulse is racing.
Okay.
So I have this neighbor, she's a couple doors down from me, and I'm pretty sure she has some mental problems from her own traumas in her half-mile dirt road that I walk around my house. And I'm walking down the road, and all of a sudden, out from her property come two dogs. I've never seen dogs there before. One's a pit bull, one's this little pup. So I have my dog on a leash, and it's so hard for me. I go down to pick up my dog, I turn my back. But while this is going on, while I'm going down to get my dog, she's already yelling at me, "Don't you start with me. My dog doesn't even have..." And she just starts cussing at me. So I'm turned this way, trying to protect my dog, thinking if I take that whatever, right now I can't think because you upset me so much.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm thinking the dog won't come at me, right? All of a sudden, she's in front of my face. I've got my dog here. She's leaned up against me. Oh my. And all I say is, I've had a dog killed in front of me before, which I had. I had a little Papillon, and another pit bull took it, went like this, and tossed it. So I already had trauma from that. Now I'm getting trauma from her. And when she's yelling, there's no use in yelling back. So I step like this, we bump shoulders, and she yells to her partner, "Did you see her hit me?" And I'm like, "Oh no, now I'm really in trouble. Just keep walking, Kimberly, just keep walking." So, because there was no use in debating, talking, anything. Just get out of there. Is that all you need to know?
That's good. Thank you so much, Kimberly. All kinds of things can create tension in our lives. All kinds of things can create chaos, and we're not comfortable, and we're uncomfortable. We wonder what to do. We wonder, what is the source of all this chaos? I was in Hong Kong years ago. Shirley and I and the kids had gone over for a few years, and I was a chaplain at a hospital. And I stepped into one of the rooms to check with the patient, whoever. I never know who I would see behind the doors. And it was a lady that was the younger. Is this fading or is it just my hearing? Do what? Raise it. Okay. Thank you. I thought it was clipped, and it wasn't clipped, obviously. So there we go. We'll try it there. So very good. So I stepped into the room, and the lady is very well put together, and she looks very healthy and very strong. I'm not sure why she's in the hospital. Many times you come into a hospital room, and there were people that were obviously sick. They're weak. They're whatever's going on. And there didn't seem to be anything wrong with her, but I told her that I was a chaplain and wondered if she'd like to talk for a few moments, and she started to unload on me. And she unloaded way more than I was expecting, way more than I had expected at all. But she started to share. And she was, I think she was of Canadian background, and I'll call her Linda this morning. And she shared how life had been good, and she'd married somebody from outside her home country, and she'd married somebody from a foreign country, and they had a pretty good marriage, and life was good, and they had a little girl, and the girl was 10 or 12 now, I think, when I was there. And anyway, we had a pretty good talk, and then she started talking about how life had changed since his mother had moved in with them. And his mother had grown up in a country where they had servants in their home. And the servants took care of their basic needs, like picking up their clothes and sweeping the floor and cooking the food and washing the dishes and, basically everything. And so when this mother-in-law came into her home, she kind of expected the same treatment. But they didn't have a maid or a helper in their home. They didn't have a servant in their home. And so she expected her daughter-in-law, that is Linda, to take care of her. And Linda was not used to waiting on people hand and foot, not used to taking care of all their needs. And the tension in the home was incredible. It was just unbearable, and she was making life very hard. And she shared how difficult things were in the home, and how she was afraid to even leave her daughter with her grandma because of the tension in the home. And she shared how one time she needed to leave the home in the morning before grandma got up. And so she showed the grandma how to make the orange juice. You take the orange juice out of the freezer, you dump it in the pitcher, and then you dump 3 cans of water in there and you stir it up. And you've got can't you get somebody to make it for me? Can't you stay and make it? What? And she's going on and on. And when Linda got home, the orange juice had never been made. Another time the lady needed a haircut. And so she didn't like to go out for a haircut. It was so hard to go out. So she had somebody come in and give her a haircut. The lady came in and gave her a haircut, but the lady never wanted to come back again. It got so bad in that home where she didn't want to leave her daughter with her grandma. And she was just bent out of shape. And the worst of it was she was in the hospital, literally, for some kind of stomach upset, some kind of problems there. And it had to do largely with the tension in the home. And she said she doesn't even know I'm in the hospital because of her. And her anxiety just went sky high. What is it that causes so much conflict around us? And in our homes, and in our lives, and in everything going on around us? What is it that causes so much struggle? There's a lot going on in our world. A lot of things that we don't understand, a lot of things that don't make sense to us. But Linda was then we look in the Bible and we read in Ephesians a verse. It's a verse that we're familiar with, but in Ephesians chapter 6, the verse that shall I try a different mic? So we'll try this one for a minute and see if this works a little better. Oh, you got a different one there? You're so good, Mike. Uh-huh. There's always challenges in life, aren't there? Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12 says, simple verse that we're familiar with, but it speaks to me in a different way this morning. It says, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in heavenly places. Oh, my friends, if we could just grasp the reality of this verse, our lives would be so much easier. One simple verse, our lives would become much simpler. Other people are not our enemy. Our battle is not against flesh and blood, the verse says. Our battle is not against the things of this world. It's so easy to get all bent out of shape about the things that are going on around us. We have an enemy, but it's not our friends. It's not our husband. It's not our wife. It's not our neighbor. It's not somebody else in the house. Our neighbor, or our enemy, is an unseen enemy. But he influences, he makes his influence felt in everything we do. And friends, when you're in a war, life is different. And if you understand you're in a war, It's okay. But so often we forget that we're in a battle, we're in a war. There's a lot going on, there's a conflict going on. And we have an And when we forget we have an enemy, we can't figure out why stuff is going. You know, you kind of expect that. You feel, well, it was close, but I'm okay. You know, I'll be all right. But when we forget that we're in a battle and we get wounded, we say, where did that come from? What did I do to deserve that? It's a different fact when you remember that you're in a battle, that the war is going on. And in wars, people get wounded. When wars, people get hurt. People struggle. We wouldn't be taken by surprise that we're wounded if we remember that we're in a battle, that it's a difficult world that we live in. We wouldn't be surprised. We wouldn't be surprised when things don't just go our way. We all know that in a war, we often don't get what we want. And you know, in the Bible, Jesus, as he was leaving his disciples, he was very careful what he shared with them. And he made it very clear to them that their lives would be challenging, that they wouldn't get everything, they wouldn't always get everything they wanted, that life would get difficult at times, that it would be hard. He didn't tell his disciples that their work would be easy. He showed them that there was a vast confederacy arrayed against them, and they would have to fight against principalities and against powers and against the rulers of darkness in the world and against spiritual wickedness in high places. You know, in this country, we've enjoyed a pretty good degree of peace and freedom for a long time, haven't we? And it's been so long that our parents and our grandparents maybe didn't really see war. And it's a different world that we live in. But there are parts of the world where war is continuing. Of course, our minds turn to places like the Ukraine or to Gaza or Israel, or where, you know, life, you know, we know there are ongoing conflicts going on. But for us, we don't have to deal with it too often. So it's not a daily struggle that we face. But in war zones, there are casualties. There's going to be destruction. There's going to be people hurt. There's going to be lives lost. And so when something happens in a war zone, nobody is surprised. Nobody's set back because they expect the bad things to happen. When something bad happens, they expect that. And that's what happens when you're in a war zone. It goes with the territory. It's just normal. So everybody's expecting it. If we're aware that we're in the middle of a war, we would live our lives differently. Life would take on a certainty. Life would take on a focus. Life would take on a direction. And we would be very, very careful. People who live in a war zone are alert for signs of danger. They're awake and alert. They take good care of themselves. They take good care of their families. They're cautious. Bottom line, they live their lives differently because they know they're in a war zone. Oh, my friends, our war, our battle, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but we are in a battle nonetheless. It's a very real battle. It's a spiritual battle, and spiritual battles need to be fought just as in actuality, just like a real battle. You know, there's a story in the Old Testament that reminds us again of this battle, that there's so much going on that we don't see. And if you want to turn in the book of 2 Kings, 2 Kings chapter 6, there's a story there about Elisha, and the king is, there's bad things going on, and he wants God is working in amazing ways. 2 Kings chapter 6, I'm starting with verse 8. And the Arameans, they plot to capture Elisha, or the Syrians sometimes, some versions say, but it's the same people. It says, now the king of Aram, I'm reading from the New American Standard Bible, it says, now the king of Aram was making war against Israel. And he consulted with his servants, saying, in such a place shall be my camp. In other words, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to attack Israel. I'm going to do this. But the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, saying, be careful that you do not pass this place, because the Arameans are coming down there. And the king of Israel sent scouts to the place about which the man of God had told him. So he warned him so that he was on guard there more than once. The king of Aram was going to catch them, was going to ambush them, and the king of Israel was able to see what was coming on. He was able to hear from Elisha. He shared with him, don't go there, be careful, watch out. And so they watched out and everybody was safe. Well, of course, this made the king of Aram very mad. It says in verse 11, now the heart of the king of Aram was enraged over this matter. And he called his servants and said to them, will you not tell me which one of us is for the king of Israel? Somebody's on the enemy's side. Somebody's fighting against us. Who's doing this? And notice it says in the previous verse that this didn't just happen once. It happened more than once. It happened several times, many times. It says more than once or twice. Sounds to me like it was 3 or 4 or 5 times. It happened over and over. And the king was just sure that somebody was in his private council telling the king of Israel what was going on. But one of his servants, verse 12, one of his servants said, no, my lord the king, but Elisha the prophet who's in Israel tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. The prophet Elisha knows what's going on. He knows what you're saying in your council. He knows what your plans are. And so verse 13, so he said, go and see where he is, so that I may send men and take him. And it was told to him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. That is the prophet Elisha is in Dothan. And so the king of Aram made plans. He sent horses and chariots, it says, and a substantial army there. And they came by night and surrounded the city. Solve that problem. We'll get this guy and we'll take him. We'll do him in. Take care of him. That will take care of the problem. So verse 15 says, now when the attendant of the man of God had risen early and gone out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was circling the city. And his servant said to him, this is hopeless, my master. What are we to do? Have you ever spoken words like that? Have you ever felt like that? It's an awful situation. It's horrible. It's hopeless. This is hopeless, my master. What are we to do? The enemy is surrounding us. There's no way out this time. There's no warning. We had no warning. What are we going to do? Where did the Lord go? How did he fail us? How did he let us down here? How did this happen? But our God isn't taken by surprise. So he said, that is the prophet Elisha said, do not be afraid, for those who are with us are greater than those who are with them. Oh, my friends, those are powerful words. We need to be reminded continually that those that are with us are greater than those who are with them. Then Elisha prayed and said, Lord, please open his eyes so that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. It doesn't say all around the city. It doesn't say all around the servant, but obviously we understand that God had his man taken care of, and God was taking care of his people. What a story. The Lord opened his eyes. Saw, and the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire. All the men was terrified when he saw any way of escape. He was sure the end was at hand. But notice what Elisha's response was. He said, do not be afraid, for those who are with us are greater than those who are with them. That's good stuff, isn't it? Don't forget it. Don't forget that those who are with us are greater than those who are with them. The SEA Bible commentary says, when a man of God is surrounded by the enemies of the Lord, he may always have the assurance that the strength that is with him is infinitely greater than the strength of the enemy. Isn't that good? The strength that's with us is always greater than what's with the enemy. Always. And we forget there's a whole army surrounding God's people. If our eyes could be open, we could see amazing things. Many, many stories we could tell you about people that have seen them, or one of the stories I heard recently, I'll just share briefly with you. This man was in conflict resolution. And one of the things he was doing was working in a foreign country to help people understand who they were and to take away their desire to go out and join with the, quote, terrorists, So he's working with people before they become terrorists, but who may well be in communication with the terrorists that are trying to draw them into their camp. It's a dangerous work. It's a difficult work. And he was out there and he had his team with him, and they had their interpreter, and he had a young man that he was training that had never been with him in this before. And so they go out in the middle of the desert and meet somebody in their tent at night, and they get in there. And they get in there, and of course the people have food prepared for them. And they walk in, and there's settings for 4 of them there. But there's only 3 of them eating. The translator and the young man and the leader. And they walk in there, and they enjoy their food, and the young man says, why is this 4th plate here? Who's it for? And the guy says, I'm not sure. That's just what they did. And the young man says, well, have they ever done this before? You've been in settings like this before. Has it ever happened? The guy says, no. And they talked for a while, and then they ate their food. And it was 2 or 3 days into the training, the time they'd been there. And they finally they realized that they're... anyway, they asked the man, why are there 4 place settings here when there's only 3 of us here? And they said, oh, it's for your guard. And the guy says, our guard, and they look at each other. And finally, the locals that they were visiting there in the home realized that they didn't see their guard. And tell me about our guard. Oh, he's a man and he's got a bright sword. Our guard has a sword? And they realized that these people that they're teaching, that they're helping, that they're leading, are seeing angels that they themselves can't see. Oh, my friends, we have an army around us, an army willing to help us and to be with us. We're surrounded by God's people. The weakest child of God, seemingly alone and forsaken on earth, need never be afraid of all the forces the enemy may send against him. With God on his side, he is more than a match for the mightiest hosts of evil. Again, from Bible commentary, second Bible commentary, page 884. Oh, the greatest realities of our lives cannot be seen with eyes of flesh. Notice it's only when Elisha closes his eyes and prays that his servant really sees. Sometimes we see more when our eyes are closed, don't we? Sometimes we do. How about you and me? We'd see so much more if we would close our eyes and look to God. If we would cry out to him and have him open our eyes. In 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about the realities, the eternal realities. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18. He says, well, we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. What about the things that preoccupy your mind? What about the things that you focus on? Oh, it's so easy to focus on the things that are temporary. It's so easy to focus on the things that are just here today and then they're gone. What are the things that discourage you? What are the things that make life hard? They're the temporary things. Oh, when we look to the world around us, we're discouraged. And it's easy for the enemy to defeat us. But when we close our eyes and pray, we're surrounded by the realities of eternity. They come into focus, and we can be encouraged. Earlier, I shared with you a quote from the book of that book, Acts of the Apostles, about how Christ did not tell his disciples that their work would be easy. Let me share with you a little more of the quote again. Christ did not tell his disciples that their work would be easy. He showed them the vast confederacy of evil arrayed against them. They would have to fight against principalities and against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. But they would not be left to fight alone. He assured them that he would be with them. Would go forth in faith that if they would, for the one mightier than angels would be in their ranks, the general of the armies of heaven. And he made full provision for the prosecution of their work and took upon himself the responsibility of its success. So long as they obeyed his word and worked in connection with him, they could not fail. Oh, friends, we have a God. We have a God that wants to reveal himself to us and to reveal himself in us and when we can allow him to do his work. It's so easy to be terrified. It's so easy to be scared by the things we see around us. But the eternal realities are very encouraging. When the servant saw the chariots of fire, and it wasn't just any chariots, it was the chariots of fire around him, he knew that he was okay. When we're in God's hands, we may know that we're okay. Let's close with prayer this morning. Father, we're thankful this morning for the privilege we have of knowing you and trusting you. We're thankful for the opportunity we have to be involved with the things of your kingdom. And I pray you will continue your work in our hearts and help us not to be distracted by temporary setbacks and the little things that distract us now and then, Lord. You have a big work to do, a mighty work, and we want to be available to you. Continue to speak to us. Continue to open our eyes that we can see and be reminded of the great things you have for us. We pray in your name.